case of Rebecca Bleefnick. Rebecca and Tim, who met at Quincy University, were the epitome of a perfect couple. Rebecca was a biology major and a tennis player, while Tim was a star football player. 2 years after graduating, the practical couple decided to tie the knot. Instead of splurging on an engagement ring and a lavish honeymoon, they chose to save their money. Although Rebecca had a genuine interest in medicine and had dreamed of becoming a doctor, she decided to pursue motherhood instead. Her dream came true when she and Tim had 3 sons. Tim was known for his charisma and ability to entertain. In 2008, he auditioned for American Gladiators, making it to the final round. Years later, in 2019, he received an invitation from the producers of Family Feud to participate in the show with his family. Rebecca's nursing school commitments prevented her from joining Tim on the TV show Family Feud. Undeterred, Tim assembled a team of family members, including his parents and brothers. The show's format features 2 teams competing to guess the most popular responses to survey questions from 100 people. Despite being unprepared, Tim's team performed well, earning points and ranking second on the scoreboard. They went on to participate in 3 episodes, winning a total of $20,000, which was divided equally among the family members. However, Tim did not share any of the winnings with his wife, Rebecca. This decision highlights the strain on Tim and Rebecca's marriage, which began when Rebecca pursued a nursing career against Tim's wishes. Tim had expressed concerns about Rebecca's well-being and ability to manage stress, but Rebecca's friends believed Tim was opposed to her independence and autonomy. Rebecca's friends noticed that she was becoming increasingly unhappy in her marriage over time. At first, her marriage to Tim was relatively happy for about 5 years. But then Tim started to become more controlling and manipulative. Despite Rebecca's hard work in her nursing studies and job, Tim didn't pull his weight at home, leaving Rebecca to handle most of the responsibilities. Rebecca realized that their marriage was struggling and wanted to fix it. She suggested that they go to marriage counseling together. She believed that counseling could help them find solutions and improve their relationship. However, refused to go, despite Rebecca's efforts to save their marriage. In January 2021, after 11 years of marriage, Tim suddenly filed for divorce, which caught Rebecca off guard. She had been committed to working through their issues, but Tim had already made up his mind. He moved out of their family home and into a new house across town, leaving Rebecca to pick up the pieces. Tim and Rebecca's divorce was extremely contentious. They were unable to agree on anything, and their communication broke down completely. The couple disputed several issues, including who would get custody of the children, how they would divide their property, and how much alimony one would pay the other. Things escalated to the point where Tim felt threatened and applied for a court order to protect himself from Rebecca, alleging that she was stalking and harassing him. Rebecca had a different view of the situation, accusing Tim of harassment. She shared her concerns with friends through text messages, describing incidents where Tim yelled at her, pushed her in front of their sons, and threw things. Rebecca feared Tim might do something drastic to take her children away, which alarmed her sister, who knew Rebecca's fears were valid and that she needed help to protect herself. Rebecca then filed for an order of protection against Tim, claiming he entered her home without permission and lied about their interactions. However, the judge denied both Rebecca and Tim's requests, instead ordering them to stay away from each other's homes, except during child custody exchanges. In February 2023, Tim told the police he wouldn't return a gun, calling Rebecca a derogatory name. At the time, Rebecca and Tim's 3 sons, aged 12, 10, and 5, were staying with Tim at his home, just a mile from Rebecca's residence. Their divorce was set to be finalized in just 1 week. Tim contacted Rebecca's father the next day, worried because he couldn't reach Rebecca, and she had failed to pick up the boys from school as planned. Given Rebecca's dedication as a mother, her father suspected something was seriously wrong. Concerned for Rebecca's safety, her father rushed to her house. When he arrived, he entered the house, calling out to Rebecca, but received no response. He went upstairs to her bedroom, where he found a disturbing scene. Rebecca lay on her back, covered in blood and gunshot wounds. After Rebecca's father discovered her body in the bathroom, detectives and forensic experts arrived at the house. They began by carefully examining the outside of the property, searching for clues. Their investigation revealed that the suspect had probably entered the house by forcing open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. The discovery led investigators to believe that the suspect used a patio chair to gain access to the house and climb up to the roof. By retracing the suspect's likely path, they went to Rebecca's bedroom where they found the door had been violently kicked in or broken. The state of the door suggested to investigators that the suspect had forcibly entered the room, probably in search of Rebecca. Evidence indicated that Rebecca had tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect had pursued her and caught up. Ultimately, the suspect shot Rebecca inside the bathroom. During their search of the bathroom, where Rebecca's body was found, investigators stumbled upon her cell phone. Upon examining Rebecca's phone, investigators found a 911 call, dialed at 1:11 a.m. This led them to form a theory about the events of that night. They believed that as the suspect chased Rebecca through the house, she tried to call for help, but accidentally dialed a wrong number before she could try calling 911 again. The misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. suggested to investigators that the suspect had knocked the phone out of Rebecca's hand. They believed Rebecca was likely killed around this time. However, when police questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them remembered hearing any noise around 1:11 a.m., which raised suspicions among the investigators. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not a botched burglary, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind significant evidence. One notable discovery was a partial shoe print found near the point where the suspect entered the house. The shoe print discovered at the crime scene could be crucial in identifying the type of shoe worn by the suspect, including its make and model, as well as providing details about the size and shape of their feet. The presence of 8.9mm shell casings and small pieces of shredded plastic near Rebecca's body also provide significant leads for the investigators. Despite collecting these key pieces of evidence, the investigators were unsure how to interpret their findings. To gain more insight, they decided to send the evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. Specifically, they wanted to determine if any of Rebecca's personal belongings matched the evidence found at the crime scene. The investigation began when Rebecca's father found her lifeless body in the bathroom of her home. Upon arriving at the scene, investigators carefully examined the exterior of the house, leading them to identify how the perpetrator gained entry by prying open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. Here's what likely happened. The suspect used a patio chair to climb up to the roof and entered the house. The investigators retraced the suspect's steps and found that the bedroom door had been violently kicked in or broken, suggesting the suspect had forced their way in, probably looking for Rebecca. It seems Rebecca tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect caught up with her. Unfortunately, the suspect shot and killed Rebecca in the bathroom. The investigators found Rebecca's phone near her body and examined it. They discovered that she had dialed 911, but mistakenly entered an extra digit, 91126, at 1:11 a.m. This discovery helped the investigators piece together the events. They believe Rebecca was desperately trying to call for help as the suspect chased her through the house, but she accidentally dialed the wrong number. Before she could try calling 911 again, the suspect likely knocked the phone out of her hand. The timing of the misdialed call, at 1:11 a.m., led investigators to believe that Rebecca's murder likely occurred around that time. However, when they questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them reported hearing any suspicious noises, which was surprising given the fact that she had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not the result of a burglary gone wrong, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind a significant amount of evidence. One crucial discovery was a partial shoe print near the point of entry, which could help identify the brand and model of the shoe, as well as the size and shape of the suspect's foot. The crime scene also yielded 8.9mm shell casings, and small pieces of shredded plastic were found scattered near Rebecca's body. After gathering all the evidence, the investigators were unsure what to make of their findings, so they decided to send the said evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. The detectives wanted to determine if any of the evidence found at the crime scene matched Rebecca's belongings, A neighbor had installed a security camera on the side of their house after their car was broken into a year earlier. The camera was directed towards the neighbor's driveway, which shared a boundary with Rebecca's home, and was set to turn on and alert the neighbor whenever it detected movement. Although the camera didn't capture anything significant on the night of Rebecca's death, it did record something unusual the previous day at 1:05 a.m. The footage showed a person walking down the driveway towards the back of Rebecca's house, a potentially crucial discovery in the case. About 48 minutes after the initial sighting, the same individual was seen walking in the opposite direction. Interestingly, Rebecca's neighbor had captured a similar incident on their camera about a week prior, on February 14th. After reviewing their security footage, Rebecca's neighbors noticed a suspicious dark-clad figure lurking around her house on Valentine's Day, prompting them to alert her immediately. Upon learning about the mysterious figure, Rebecca became increasingly paranoid. Although she claimed not to have seen anyone on her property, she had heard unsettling voices in her backyard the previous night, which frightened her. Based on the security camera footage, the police expanded their search to neighboring houses to gather more evidence of the dark-clad individual. Their search led them to a house near the Quinney Bus Barn, where they found footage of a person riding a bike dressed in dark clothing heading towards Rebecca's house. These videos confirmed the description of the mysterious person seen in the original driveway footage, providing a clear consistency in the suspect's appearance. After analyzing the recorded times of the videos, detectives suspected that the person on the bike was the same individual seen in Rebecca's driveway footage. Although Rebecca's neighbor's security camera didn't capture footage of the mysterious person on the night of her murder, officers found footage of someone on a bike riding towards Rebecca's house just before and after the incident. This person matched the description of the individual seen lurking in Rebecca's driveway in the days leading up to her murder. While the video evidence was helpful in the investigation, its poor quality limited the information it provided. The detectives couldn't identify the person in the video due to the grainy image, making it difficult to determine their gender. However, they did notice one distinctive feature. The bike had no reflectors on its wheels. When Rebecca's sister heard that she was murdered, only one person came to mind as a suspect: Rebecca's estranged husband, Tim. Rebecca's sister, who had a first-hand account of the contentious divorce between Rebecca and Tim, shared this information with the detectives working on her sister's case. The detectives suspected Tim of murdering Rebecca, especially since her murder happened just a week before their divorce was due to be finalized. During the investigation, they made a crucial discovery. A bike with no reflectors on its wheels, similar to the one seen on security footage, was found just a block from Tim's house. This discovery increased the suspicion surrounding Tim, leading the detectives to obtain a search warrant for his home. When the police executed the warrant, Tim cooperated fully, standing outside his home with the officers as they searched his belongings. On March 13, 2023, 2 weeks after Rebecca's murder, Tim was arrested and charged with her murder. When his mugshot was released, Rebecca's family and friends were shocked by his appearance, which was very different from the clean-cut man they had known. Tim's friends and family were shocked by his disheveled appearance, which they attributed to the emotional toll of his recent divorce. His once neat and tidy hair was now unkempt, and his clothes were messy. They speculated that the divorce had affected not only his physical appearance, but also his mental well-being. However, Tim had a surprising explanation for his changed look. He revealed that he was growing his hair out to support a charity campaign for cancer research. Despite this, a viral video clip showed Tim's appearance on Family Feud, where he made a bizarre statement about regretting his marriage, which took on a disturbing tone after he was arrested for murdering his wife. Many people believed that Tim's comment on Family Feud was a strange and unsettling prediction of what would eventually happen. They thought it showed that he had hidden feelings about his wife and was a sign that something bad was happening in their relationship. When the police looked into Tim's phone, they found that he had made a fake Facebook account under the name John Smith. During their investigation, they discovered that Tim had been searching for a specific type of bicycle on Facebook, a blue Schwinn bike with no reflectors on the wheels. This was an important discovery because it matched the description of a bike that was found abandoned just 1 block away from Tim's house. Despite having strong evidence against Tim, the detectives faced a significant obstacle when they arrested him. Tim was held in jail without the possibility of bail, but he requested a quick trial, which is his right under the law. Prosecutors were required to bring the matter to trial within 90 days of Tim's arrest. The prosecution faced a significant challenge in convincing a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Tim murdered Rebecca due to the absence of a confession or DNA evidence. Juries typically look for these two key elements in criminal cases. To prove Tim's guilt in the murder of his wife Rebecca, the prosecution faced a significant challenge. Exactly 3 months after Rebecca's tragic murder in her home, Tim's trial began on May 23, 2023. During the trial, the prosecution presented several key pieces of evidence found at the crime scene. One notable piece of evidence was the shredded plastic fragments discovered around Rebecca's body. The prosecution argued that these fragments came from an owl's grocery bag. Further investigation revealed that similar bags were found in Tim's house. The prosecution alleged that Tim used these bags as a makeshift silencer when he shot his estranged wife multiple times. They claimed that the bags were used to muffle the sound of the gunfire, preventing it from being heard by others. The prosecution also presented DNA evidence, suggesting that Tim left behind DNA while using the Aldi bags. An expert testified that it was highly likely Tim contributed to the DNA found, and that his DNA could not be ruled out as a match for the DNA found under Rebecca's fingernails. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting that a crowbar found in Tim's basement might have been used to force open the window at the victim's house on the night of the murder. Although an expert testified that there were microscopic similarities between the crowbar and the window's prime arc, she couldn't conclusively say that the crowbar was involved. To build a stronger case, the prosecution presented records of several searches made on Tim's phone, including how to open my door with a crowbar, how to make a homemade pistol silencer, how to clean gunpowder off your hands, and average police response time in Quincy. The prosecution's expert witness testified that she compared the shell casings found at the crime scene to those found at Tim's house during the investigation. Her analysis revealed that 27 of the casings from Tim's home were fired from the same 9mm weapon used to kill Rebecca. When investigators searched Tim's house, they didn't find Rebecca's 9mm gun, which he had refused to return to her. Tim claimed he hadn't seen the gun in months before Rebecca's murder. During the trial, the defense had the opportunity to call witnesses, but chose not to. After the 6-day trial, the jury took 4 hours to reach a guilty verdict, and Tim was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Despite claiming innocence and planning to appeal, Tim is behind bars, and Rebecca's family believes justice has been served. During the sentencing hearing, Rebecca's family read impact statements. One of her sisters addressed Tim, telling him how his actions affected his son's well-being. She stressed that his choices were causing his sons to suffer. Rebecca's sister vowed to keep her memory alive for her 3 sons, even after her passing. Today, we'll explore the story of Vincent Gillis, a boy with striking blue eyes who eventually became something monstrous. But what truly happens inside the mind of a psychopath? For years, scientists have been working to unravel this enigma. Research indicates that psychopaths aren't unusually intelligent or misunderstood geniuses. In fact, their cognitive abilities are fairly average. The real difference lies in how their emotional and reward systems operate or fail to. This malfunction causes them to take pleasure in actions that most people would find horrifying. Studies also reveal that psychopaths show reduced brain activity in emotional situations, such as when they experience fear or witness someone else in danger. In essence, they feel almost nothing when others are threatened. 2 key elements often influence whether someone becomes a killer: their biological makeup and their cultural environment, including their upbringing and social connections. Yet, it's crucial to remember that not all psychopaths are criminals or murderers. Most psychopaths view themselves as above the law and fully understand the consequences of their actions. They are not victims of disease, but rather individuals who choose to act without remorse. On the surface, Sean Vincent Gillis seemed perfectly ordinary. Although there were early hints of violent tendencies, few could have imagined the darkness that would later define his life. As an adult, he spiraled into a decade-long rampage of crime and brutality. Sean was born on June 24, 1962, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to Yvonne and Norman Gillis. His father struggled with alcoholism and mental illness, and around the time of Sean's birth, a deeply disturbing event shattered the family's sense of safety. Norman once held a gun to his infant son's head. Terrified by his own instability, he left soon after, fearing he might harm his wife and child. In the years that followed, Norman drifted in and out of psychiatric institutions and eventually lost all contact with his family. Sean was raised in southern Louisiana by his mother, with help from his paternal grandparents. Yvonne worked full-time at a local television station and affectionately referred to her son as her little blue-eyed angel. By all accounts, Sean appeared to be a quiet, well-mannered child with average grades, a fondness for model cars, and an easy rapport with his peers. When Sean was 10 years old, he and his mother relocated to another neighborhood nearby. Some of their new neighbors noticed that Sean could be a bit rough when playing with other children. The two lived in a modest ranch-style home in a quiet, middle-class area. Sean attended Catholic schools where he met one of his closest friends, John Green. John described him as intelligent, respectful toward adults, and often quite funny. By 8th grade, another boy, John Roses, joined their small circle of friends. The group spent much of their free time together, going to the movies, hanging out at the mall, or visiting each other's homes. As the boys grew older, they occasionally got into minor trouble. During one phase, they experimented with Satanism, drawn more by the thrill and fear it evoked than by genuine belief. They also began smoking marijuana, which Sean seemed to enjoy more enthusiastically than the others. During his teenage years, Sean's violent tendencies began to surface more clearly, marked by recurring episodes of uncontrollable anger. One night, around 3 in the morning, a neighbor named Caroline was startled by loud banging outside. When she looked out the window, she saw Sean furiously attacking a set of trash cans in her yard. On another occasion, he confided in a neighbor about his frustration over not having a girlfriend. Caroline later described him as an angry young man prone to sudden fits of rage, a side of Sean his mother never witnessed. At 17, Sean experienced a major emotional upheaval when his paternal grandfather passed away. The loss led him to reunite with his father for the first time since infancy, marking the beginning of a renewed relationship between the two. Around the same time, Sean began accumulating a minor criminal record, with arrests for offenses such as traffic violations, driving under the influence, possession of marijuana, and contempt of court. At 18, Sean made a discovery that further unsettled him: a collection of photographs belonging to his father that depicted men in sexual acts. This revelation of his father's homosexuality deeply disturbed Sean and strained their fragile relationship. By then, Norman had joined Alcoholics Anonymous in an effort to overcome his addiction. After high school, Sean attended various community technical institutes and juggled low-paying jobs while still living with his mother. One of his main jobs was at a convenience store chain. He eventually graduated from a community school with a degree in computer science. When Sean turned 30, his mother moved to Atlanta for a job offer. Refusing to move with her, Sean stayed behind, living alone for the first time in his mother's house. He soon felt lonely and became so obsessed with pornography that he began neglecting his jobs. His mother continued to send him money to help with financial difficulties. However, he was very angry with her for moving away and would sometimes scream in anger. Neighbors reported that he often lay on the grass at night, shouting loudly at the moon, including obscenities directed at his mother. In 1992, he was caught peeping through a neighbor's window as his obsession with pornography grew. In 1994, he met Terry, a girl who worked in a store, and they began dating. Her best friend introduced them, highlighting their shared interests in science fiction, the TV series Star Trek, and collecting memorabilia. To her, he was like a teddy bear, someone you'd bring home to meet your mother. While Terry didn't find Sean extraordinary, she valued his kindness and thoughtfulness. The only downside for her was his fondness for drinking. After their first date, a peculiar incident occurred. During an argument, Terry slapped him and Sean started crying. She immediately reassured him that it wouldn't happen again. After overcoming this incident, they established a stable relationship and moved in together into Sean's house a year later. Terry mentioned that Sean didn't believe in sex. He once told her that he had been taught it was something unpleasant and to be avoided. The same year he met his girlfriend, Sean began a crime spree that lasted nearly a decade. This softly spoken, seemingly intelligent man claimed he started killing due to stress. On March 21, 1994, he committed his first murder. He entered the St. James Place, a prestigious retirement home in Baton Rouge located across from where he worked. Around 3 in the morning, he managed to get inside when a nurse left the door unlocked. His victim was Brian, an 82-year-old woman. He attempted to assault her but froze when she screamed as he touched her. Losing control, he silenced her by stabbing and slashing her with a household knife he always carried. The ferocity of the stabs was such that he nearly decapitated the elderly woman. This crime shocked the Baton Rouge community. Meanwhile, Sean's obsession with pornography led him to websites displaying abuse and mutilation of women. He even once showed his girlfriend a picture of a deceased woman from one of these sites. She didn't pay much attention to it and continued their relationship, unaware of the depths of his depravity. Despite the brutality of his first murder, it took another 5 years before Sean killed again, and then the number of victims rapidly increased. He later confessed to a reporter that the pause was because he felt content during that time. On January 4, 1999, Catherine Hall, a 29-year-old prostitute and drug addict living in a state housing project known for drug dealers and prostitution on North Street, became his second victim. She got into his car after he said he wanted her services. Once inside, he restrained her with a plastic zip tie. She tried to escape, but Sean grabbed and stabbed her. He struck her with the knife 16 times in total. After that, he removed her clothes and mutilated her body. Finally, he dumped her body in a secluded area. The next day, a squirrel hunter found her body lying face down on a rural road. For the police, it was a particularly macabre scene. She was positioned in a sort of ballet pose next to a dead-end street sign, a grim and sick joke indicating that the investigators were at a dead end. Months later, in May 1999, came the third victim. Sean began stalking a woman he had seen jogging in the southern metropolitan area of Baton Rouge. Her name was Hardy Schmidt, a 52-year-old married woman with 3 children, well known in her community. She loved running and had once participated in the Boston Marathon. For 3 weeks, Sean drove around the area looking for her. Around 5:30 a.m. on Sunday, May 30th, 1999, he finally saw her jogging along an avenue. Sean hit her with his white Chevy Cavalier as she jogged, knocking her into a ditch. He quickly got out of the car, forced her inside, placed a sturdy plastic zip tie around her neck, and drove to a park on Highland Road, where he assaulted her before killing her. He then put her body in the trunk of his car, where it stayed until 2 days later when he noticed a bad smell coming from the car, prompting him to dump her body in a swamp in a rural parish, far from Baton Rouge. A cyclist eventually found her body. From then on, Sean committed seemingly unconnected murders, which prevented authorities from even realizing they were happening. He mercilessly murdered women by strangling them with a plastic zip tie after assaulting them. He would often cut them up, dismembering them, a dark and utterly evil practice. On November 12, 1999, he claimed his fourth victim, Joyce Williams, a 36-year-old prostitute. He took her to a sugarcane field beside the Mississippi River and strangled her with a plastic zip tie. Then he took her to his house to complete his gruesome ritual. And for the first time, he consumed the human flesh of a victim. After the murder, he left the body in the trunk of his car and went to pick up his girlfriend from work. Later that night, he dumped the body in a secluded area. It was not found until a month later. His next victim was Lillian Robinson, another 52-year-old prostitute whom he attacked in January 2000. He repeated his usual method and took her to his house, but he did not have time to finish because his girlfriend would soon be home from work. However, he did commit necrophilia. He then abandoned her body in the largest swamp in the United States, located in central southern Louisiana. In March, almost 2 months later, the corpse was discovered by some fishermen. In October, 38-year-old prostitute Marilyn Nevels became his next victim. He killed her in the same way as the others, and after bringing the body to his house, he showered with it before leaving it on top of a levee, unhidden about 3 miles from his home near the Mississippi River. The decomposing body was found on October 31st by a man walking in the woods. Sean did not kill again until October 2003, 3 years later, when he took the life of 45-year-old Johnny Mae Williams. He picked up a divorced mother of 3 who was also a prostitute and drug addict. Sean knew her well as she had cleaned his house several times over about 10 years. He took her to a remote area where he beat, abused, and strangled her, then mutilated her body with a knife. He took her hands as a souvenir. He left the body exposed on top of an embankment after positioning it in various poses to take photographs. When it was found, the body was so mutilated that East Baton Rouge's police commented that it was barely recognizable as a human being. Her legs had numerous cuts on the front and back. Despite finding the bodies of his victims, no weapons, witnesses, or current fingerprints were ever found. The police had no leads that could direct them to the killer, which left Sean free to continue his dark deeds. 2 serial criminals were operating in the area. In 2003, after nearly 11 years since his first crime, Sean's luck began to change. On May 27, 2003, Derek Todd Lee, another serial killer active in the Baton Rouge metropolitan area who had taken the lives of 7 women since 1992, was arrested. Sean admired this criminal, even keeping newspaper clippings about his crimes, aspiring to surpass him. With Lee's capture, the police started paying closer attention to unresolved cases involving women. When some of these crimes could not be linked to Derek, investigators began to suspect that another serial killer might have been operating simultaneously. Then, in February 2004, Sean committed what would be his 8th and final murder. He killed 43-year-old Donna Bennett Johnston, who had become a prostitute due to her drug addiction. She was heavily intoxicated, making it easy for him to lure her into his car. He took her to a secluded spot near his house. Unable to defend herself, Donna was abused and then strangled with a plastic zip tie like his previous victims. According to Sean, she became unconscious within seconds and then died. Her last words were, "I can't breathe." After killing her, he placed the body on the grass, removed all her clothes, and mutilated her body horrifically, committing cannibalism and cutting out a butterfly tattoo she had. Donna's body was discovered on February 27, 2004 in a canal south of Louisiana State University. It was, for many, Sean's most gruesome and sordid murder. Crucially, Donna had fought against her attacker, as evidenced by the DNA found under the nails of her right hand. Unfortunately, there was no match in the police records, but it was the same DNA found on 2 other bodies previously discovered, those of Catherine and Hall and Johnny Mae Williams. However, a tire print found near Donna's body proved to be Sean's undoing and a stroke of luck for the investigators, who had until then had little to go on in the case. The police established a special task force to thoroughly investigate the deaths of Donna, Johnny, and Catherine, along with other similar unsolved murders. Highly specialized experts were dedicated to this effort. Detectives took photos and made casts of the Goodyear tire tracks, which were fortunately quite distinct. These tracks were linked to a unique set of tires, and Louisiana's State Crime Lab was able to determine their make, model, and type. They further narrowed down the possibilities when they discovered that this particular tire was only manufactured over a 3-year period that ended in 2003. Only 200 of these tires were sold in the Baton Rouge metropolitan area. Local authorities collaborated with Goodyear stores to track down those who had purchased this particular type of tire in the area. Investigators then conducted DNA tests on these individuals, including Sean. The aim was to compare their DNA samples with the evidence found on one of the victims' bodies. On April 28, 2004, it was Sean's turn to provide his DNA sample for the test. He was the 26th person on the list of buyers. A police agent questioned him at his home to request the sample, which Sean provided without any issue. However, his responses raised suspicions. He mentioned knowing Johnny because she had cleaned his house several times. He also explained that his vehicle's tire tracks were found near where Donna's body was discovered because he had stopped there to urinate. Lastly, he made a bizarre comment about finding blood in his car, claiming it was from a time when Johnny had a heavy menstrual period while he was driving her somewhere. The detective was convinced he was dealing with the right man, but had to let him go that night while waiting for the DNA test results. Eventually, the tests confirmed the detective's suspicions. He was indeed the murderer. The following day, April 29, 2004, a special task force returned to the house and arrested Sean for murder. As he was being handcuffed, he looked at Terry and simply said, "I'm sorry." One of the officers approached Terry and asked if she knew she had been living with a serial killer. Her world collapsed that night. Sean had been her partner for 9 years. It was unbelievable what was happening. Later that same day, Sean confessed to his crimes while the police executed a search warrant at his house, leading to astonishing discoveries. Detectives found 45 digital photographs on his computer that showed the mutilated body of Donna, as well as the corpse in the trunk of his car. They also uncovered photos of other victims. The authorities seized 8 saws, including one for cutting metal, several knives, a machete, plastic zip ties, a 14-inch bayonet, a wooden bludgeon, 6 pocket-sized Playboy magazines, and newspaper clippings about Derek Lee's last victim. One of his computers also contained files on murders and necrophilia. Additionally, several books on both fiction and nonfiction about serial killers were confiscated. Sean confessed to his murders with a mix of pride and sadness for what he had done. He expressed regret for deceiving people, but admitted he would do it again and that if released, he would find someone before nightfall. In May 2004, FBI agents interviewed Sean. His darkest side emerged. During the conversation, he told the officials that he was playing a chess game with them as they investigated each of the crime scenes. He used TV news to strategize his next move and assess whether he was winning the game. He claimed he was the chess master then, and they would never win. His main interest was whether they found the body, where, and in what condition. He then explained to the agents how he used a combination of charm and money to lure his victims into his vehicle. He recounted how the prostitutes loved him because he treated them with respect, like ladies, even though he had no specific plan or agenda on when or where he would kill his next victim. It all depended on when the opportunity presented itself. However, he always paid close attention to when and where to dispose of the bodies. One of the most striking aspects of this case was how Sean successfully hid his double life from his partner. He made sure to pick her up after work and she never suspected a thing. Once, she noticed a bad smell coming from the trunk of the car, and he told her it was a dead animal that had hit his car. He cleaned the vehicle immediately. Another time, Terry noticed the car's mileage increasing rapidly due to the trips Sean made to find his victims and then dispose of the bodies. However, she only suspected that he might be cheating on her with another woman. Terry had to hear it from Sean himself to believe what the police were saying. She asked him if he did it, and he admitted it and expressed his regret. Sean was charged with his crimes at different times as investigators worked to find evidence that would support his confession to the murders. For example, the police had no idea about the crime committed against Marilyn Nevels. Marilyn had been missing for 4 years, a fact Sean confessed to. Her disappearance had never been reported. Meanwhile, the crime lab continued to search the house for traces of blood, bones, and tissues. This led them to realize that Sean had kept some parts of his dismembered victims' bodies in his house as souvenirs. The photographs helped him relive the murders. It was determined that he had consumed the flesh of his victims, committed necrophilia with the corpses, and even showered with one of the dead bodies and painted the nails of the hands he had mutilated. In the aftermath of Sean's arrest, a friend of Donna, his last victim for over a decade, sent a letter to the criminal. He responded with several letters in which he expressed some remorse for the murders he committed, especially for mutilating the bodies. He mentioned that he didn't talk much with Donna and that sex was not his intention. He described that night as one filled with pure evil, devoid of compassion, faith, mercy, or hope. He blamed his lack of faith and his long-standing hatred towards God. He admitted he didn't really understand what came over him and confessed that even 10 years earlier, he could never have imagined harming anyone. He described it as a mystery why he did those things to the corpse, and something deep in his subconscious told him he needed those macabre actions. He also stated that sometimes he committed the murders without knowing what he was doing. In another part of the letter, he expressed deep regret for killing those women. In the end, he showed repentance and stated he did not want to die, but that was up to the Almighty. He also declared his love for his family, now realizing he truly loved them, that God loved him and he loved God. Donna's friend passed away in 2005 from complications related to AIDS. But before her death, she handed over Sean's letters to the prosecutors, which were used in the trials against him to demonstrate his culpability for the crimes. Initially, Sean was tried for the murder of Joyce Williams. During the trial, Sean's girlfriend testified that he confessed the crime to her because he needed to make things right with God. In 2007, after years of judicial delays, he was sentenced to life imprisonment for that crime. The following year, on July 21, 2008, in a unanimous verdict, he was found guilty of the murders of 3 more of his victims. This moved the trial into the sentencing phase. The defense brought a doctor to the stand who testified that Sean exhibited signs of schizoaffective disorder, arguing that he should not be considered mentally capable. Relatives of the victims also testified. Lauren Williams, the daughter of Johnny May Williams, confronted him from the stand and asked why he did it. He shrugged and simply said, "I'm sorry," but she did not believe in his repentance. On July 31st at 3:03 p.m., the jury began deliberations on what Sean's sentence should be. At 5:45 p.m., they returned to the courtroom without having reached an agreement on the prosecution's request for the death penalty. As a result, Sean was sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor without the possibility of parole. Later, in 2013, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and received another life sentence for the deaths of Brian and Hardy Schmidt. He was incarcerated in the Louisiana State Penitentiary, where he remains to this day. No one knows for sure what stirred in Sean's subconscious, and it seems there may never be an answer. But one shocking revelation came when the district attorney questioned him, and he admitted he would have liked to have had relations with his mother. His mother's departure to another city, leaving him on his own, unleashed a rage that no one could have imagined, leading to the most horrifying murders. What's most disturbing is that despite growing up without his father, Sean was a loved child and never showed signs of being capable of such atrocities. Over time, perhaps because he had evaded suspicion for so many years, he began to display the bodies of his victims openly, as if they were his sinister trophies. Moreover, he knew how to choose his victims, hunting for prostitutes, drug addicts, and anyone willing to get into his car, people who had no one to miss them, the outcasts of society. However, he also included at least 2 individuals from better economic backgrounds, which helped him avoid sticking too closely to a single pattern. His confidence in not being caught, thinking he was winning the chess game against the police, underscores the narcissistic, grandiose, and egomaniacal character of this serial killer. The interviews in which he revealed his crimes are chilling, as they showed a man speaking calmly about heinous acts without a tremor in his voice. It seemed as if he wanted to shout it from the rooftops to let everyone know he was pure evil. The victim in this case was around the same age as the case itself when it was solved. Judith Conklin was born in 1938 in North Hollywood, California. Judy, as most people called her, met Fred Nesbitt on a blind date. Fred, in those days, worked as a lifeguard at Newport Beach, and Judy was a bright student who belonged to a tight-knit North Hollywood family. It was love at first sight which led a marriage a year later. Fred and Judy would go on to have 4 kids together. They weren't wealthy, but they were happy. In 1972, the family relocated to Irvine, California, where Fred landed a job at the Paul Monroe Hydraulics of Whittier. He quickly climbed the ranks and was eventually promoted to vice president of sales. Judy decided to stay home with the kids. She dedicated her life to the family. The family was very close. Their weekends were filled with an active outdoor life, most of which they spent on their yacht, called Felicidad 4, a 36-foot-long cabin cruiser. This was their home away from home. The family had had the boat for a long time. They recall cruising the ocean with the children on deck. Felicidad is a Spanish word that translates to happiness, But tragically, that is where their happiness was stripped away. November 26, 1980, was 9:30 in the morning when the phone rang. As Judy's son recalls, the Nesbitts had recently posted an ad in the local newspaper. They had decided to sell their yacht. There was a potential buyer on the other end of the line who wanted to come over and take a look at the boat. They set up a meeting at the Marina Dunes Yacht Anchorage in Newport Beach later in the afternoon. Judy left the house at around 12:30 to meet the potential buyer at 1 p.m. That was the last time she was seen alive. The children were home, enjoying the Thanksgiving break. As the sun began setting, their oldest son Steve, who was 20 years old at the time, was by now a bit worried. It was 7 p.m. when Fred made it back home. By then, Judy had been gone for more than 6 hours. He knew it wasn't like her to be gone for so long. Worried, he headed down to the marina to look for her. Fred thought maybe Judy might have stopped somewhere to pick up a few things, or maybe she wanted to spend some time on the boat before they sold it. Felicidad 4 did pack a lot of memories for the family, and letting it go must have been hard for her. Fred walked down to the boat, but the door was locked. Fred unlocked the door and entered. He then headed towards the front of the boat. He found her there, in the sleeping quarters, but to his horror, she was sprawled on the floor covered in blood. She was motionless and unresponsive. Fred frantically tried to feel for her pulse. His own pulse was racing. He could not tell if it was already too late or if she still had a chance. He screamed at the top of his lungs, and thankfully someone heard him. They called an ambulance, but it was in fact too late. The post-mortem report said that she had been violently attacked. There were signs that she was struck in the head 3 times with a heavy blunt object. There were signs of a struggle. As the detectives visualized the events, it was apparent that Judy had fought for her life, but her efforts to get away from her attacker were thwarted when he pulled out a small caliber gun and shot her in the head point blank. The only things that were missing were Judy's credit cards, checkbook, and some cash. The yacht was not looted, possibly because the attacker needed to flee quickly after the murder. Judy had no signs of sexual assault. The authorities went with the theory that it was a deal gone wrong. That seemed to be the most plausible scenario. Presumably, there had been some sort of argument about the selling of the yacht which triggered the assault and subsequent murder. They started questioning residents and people who were present in the area during the time of the attack. The suspect wasn't exactly as covert as he should have been. Police were able to get a detailed sketch of the murderer from eyewitnesses. Several people saw the potential buyer, and according to Ruth Mills, a woman who owned a boat docked near Felicidad 4, she claimed to have seen the man up close. That day, she had called in a maintenance worker at noon to work on her boat. She mistook the suspect for the serviceman and talked to him for a while, inquiring if he was the man appointed to service her boat. The man said no as he waited for Judy at Newport Beach. She even saw Judy walk over to him and then walk to the boat together. Ruth was a prime witness as she even heard someone screaming, but she didn't think too much about it until she heard the screaming again, followed by a loud sound which sounded like a gunshot. She wasn't the only one who heard it. There were many people in the area that day, and the bay was filled with yachts. There was no way to know where the screams came from. No one alerted the police, and no one suspected that what they heard was someone being murdered. Ruth spotted the suspect walking towards the parking lot and then, shortly after, returning to Felicidad 4. He was calm and nonchalant enough not to raise any concerns. He left shortly after. Everyone knew that had to have been the man who killed Judy. Police took Ruth in to help create a sketch of the suspect. He was described as a white man in his mid-30s with a medium build. He was wearing a pair of aviator sunglasses, a tan jacket, and brown trousers. He was well-groomed with neat short hair. Unfortunately, it was a description that matched a lot of people in the area. Many people submitted tips based on the sketch, but none turned out to be fruitful. Police had gathered evidence and fingerprints from the crime scene, but unfortunately that would not be very useful either. The Nesbitt family had hosted a party on the yacht shortly before the incident, so there were several sets of fingerprints on the boat. The main evidence they had was an unidentified brown hair. Police went on to investigate Judy's background and questioned Fred's colleagues. Everything checked out, and the Nesbitts had maintained a good reputation in the neighborhood and had no enemies. Police continued flipping through the case files to see if there were any similar incidents. From there, they zeroed in on a so-called wanted rapist who had been notorious in the San Francisco area. There were about 6 cases that were almost identical to this one. A man had raped women after making appointments with them to show him boats for sale, but none of them were killed. And of course, Judy had not been raped. This lead seemed to be promising. Yet when he was called in for questioning, he had an airtight alibi proving that he was nowhere near Newport Beach when the crime took place. He was ruled out as a suspect. The case was going nowhere, and all leads led to dead ends. With more than 200 cases of unsolved murders in Orange County, the Judy Nesbitt case was just one of many. Yet, the police never gave up, nor did the Nesbitt family. In 2002, investigators obtained DNA from the root of the hair. This was entered into the FBI database. But unfortunately, the DNA didn't match anyone. Yet again, they were at a dead end. The evidence was locked up and assigned a case number among many others. 16 years later, in 2018, the DNA was sent out for processing again, this time using brand new techniques and technology. Green Laboratories began processing the DNA using a new extraction technique to expand the DNA profile. This case would go down in history as the first case that used this technology to identify a murderer in the United States. Finally, there was a match. The Newport police finally closed the case after 41 years on the 9th of August, 2021. They had the name of the man who had evaded justice for 38 years. They eventually identified the murderer as Kenneth Elwin Marks through genetic genealogy. The man who responded to the ad and the man who Ruth Mills mistook for a serviceman 4 decades ago. Unfortunately, they were 22 years late. In April 1999, Kenneth Elwin Marks passed away after a long battle with cancer. He was seemingly a normal guy according to those who knew him. No one would have thought that this man would have been involved in the gruesome murder of Judy 19 years earlier. He was only 44 years old when he was buried at the Thomas Cemetery in Bridgeport, Texas. We will never know what really happened that day, or why anyone would take the life of a mother and wife just before Thanksgiving, a holiday that symbolizes family togetherness. Judy Nesbitt was a loving wife and mother who was violently and senselessly ripped from her family. Identifying her killer was all the more bittersweet after learning he would never face justice, at least not here on Earth. Newport Beach Police Chief John T. Lewis was quoted as saying, "This is a case that has hung heavy in the hearts of our community, our department, and the Nesbitt family." He added, "Kenneth Marks has passed away, but he no longer gets to hold the secret of his deeds." Through incredible advances in technology and the tireless dedication of these investigators, we now have some closure for all who knew and loved Judy Nesbitt. Do you think this is a case of deal gone wrong? Do you think Fred would have faced the same fate had he gone instead of Judy to finalize the deal? Case of Chris Watts. Shannon Razukzek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shannon was from Aberdeen, and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris' parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Shannon and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shannon and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shannon had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shannon defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shannon was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Sean N was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Sean N expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shanann's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Sean N worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Sean N had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Sean N loved her job, and it showed. As her coworker Cynthia DeRosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Sean N had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Sean N got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction. So she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Sean N was having a baby boy. Sean N and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Sean N was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Sean N took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece without considering Shanann's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Sean N was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Sean N expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions and that Shanann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Sean N was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Sean N and their 2 daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Sean N was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Sean N felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Sean N felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Sean N sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Sean N suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Sean N too much to do that. But Sean N was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Sean N, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Sean N that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Sean N was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Sean N proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Sean N was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Sean came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Sean soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shanann's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Sean opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Sean was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris's account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Sean returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Sean entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shanann's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Sean missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Sean, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shanann's van was parked in the garage and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Sean would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Sean's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Sean might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Sean's friends were puzzled by Chris' response, because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Sean was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Sean and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shanann's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, the police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Sean and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Sean and Chris's home, the officer found Shanann's purse, which contained her medication, and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shanann's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shanann's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. The camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shannon's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Sean or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Sean hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shannon's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris' nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Sean and might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Sean and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review, to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Sean and during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Sean and to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Sean and, as the hours ticked by with no sign of Sean and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shanann's safety, they held onto the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife, Shannon, was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Sean an emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Sean and claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shanann's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shanann was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shanann's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Sean and was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Sean and in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shanann's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their 2 daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. Sylvia Marie Likens was born on January 3, 1949 in Lebanon, Indiana, USA. She was the third of 5 children born to carnival workers Lester Likens and his wife, Betty Likens, formerly Grimes, when she was single. Sylvia grew up between 2 sets of twins, Daniel and Diana, who were 2 years older, and Benny and Jenny, who were a year younger. Her little sister Jenny had polio, which weakened one of her legs significantly, causing her to limp noticeably. She had to wear a steel brace on her leg to help her walk. Her parents, Lester and Betty, had a rocky marriage. They often sold candy, beer, and soft drinks at carnival booths throughout Indiana all summer long, constantly moving and frequently facing serious financial difficulties. The Likens children sometimes traveled with them to help out, but Sylvia and Jenny often stayed with relatives, mostly with their grandmother. This arrangement not only kept the young girls safe, but also allowed them to continue their education more steadily. From a young age, Sylvia took on babysitting and did errands for neighbors and friends. She also did household chores like ironing clothes, earning a little bit of money to buy things for herself. She often shared her earnings with her mom. Those who knew her said, Sylvia was a friendly, confident, and charming girl. She had long, wavy, light brown hair that fell just below her shoulders. Her friends called her Cookie. Despite her vibrant personality, Sylvia was self-conscious about her smile because she was missing a front tooth, which she lost while playing with one of her brothers as a child. She loved music, especially the Beatles, and was very protective of her younger sister Jenny. Jenny was much shyer and less secure. The sisters often visited a local skating rink where Sylvia would help Jenny skate, holding her hand as Jenny relied heavily on her stronger leg. In June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny Likens were living with their parents in Indianapolis. The following month, their mother was arrested and later jailed for theft. Shortly thereafter, Lester arranged for his younger daughters to stay with Gertrude Banaszewski, a mother of 2 girls, Paula and Stephanie, whom the Likens sisters had met at Arsenal Technical High School. Gertrude assured Lester that she would look after the girls as if they were her own until his return. A little after the 4th of July celebrations, the Likens sisters moved to 3850 East New York Street while their father, older brothers, and later their mother went to the East Coast with the carnival. The deal with Gertrude was that she would receive $20 a week in exchange for hosting Sylvia and Jenny and taking care of them until they returned in November. Initially, everything at the Banaszewski home seemed normal. Sylvia got along well with Stephanie, singing along to pop records and willingly helping with household chores. The Likens sisters regularly attended Sunday school with the other Banaszewski children, and the pastor praised Sylvia's kindness and respect for sacred matters. Although Lester had agreed to pay Gertrude, the payment started to arrive late, usually a day or 2 beyond the scheduled dates. However, this delay soon began to irritate Gertrude. Out of frustration, she started mistreating the girls, beginning with spanking them on their bare buttocks with various instruments, such as a 1/4 inch thick paddle, making statements such as, "Well, I took care of you 2 little bitches for a week for nothing." As the payment delays became more frequent, the beatings and mistreatment escalated. On one occasion, both girls were hit about 15 times on the back with the paddle after Paula accused them of eating too much at a church dinner they had attended with the other children. It had only been a month since they had been staying with the Banaszewski family, and it was now the end of August. By that time, Gertrude had begun to focus all her frustration and abuse almost exclusively on Sylvia. Some speculated that jealousy might have been the driving factor, as Sylvia was not only beautiful, but also had her whole life ahead of her. As the days went by, the abuse and mistreatment escalated. In addition to more frequent beatings, the sisters, particularly Sylvia, were starved. Often they were only given leftovers or spoiled food from the trash cans. On one occasion, Sylvia was accused of stealing candies, though she had actually bought them. Another time, she was publicly humiliated. Sylvia claimed she had a boyfriend in Long Beach, whom she had met in the spring when her family lived in California. As she shared stories about those days with Stephanie and Jenny, Sylvia mentioned that once she had snuggled under the covers with her boyfriend. Hearing this, Gertrude asked, "Why did you do that, Sylvia?" Sylvia shrugged and replied, "I don't know," and shrugged. A few days later, Gertrude brought up the topic again, suggesting mockingly, "Your stomach seems to be getting bigger, Sylvia. Looks like you might be having a baby." Sylvia thought it was a joke and responded, "Yeah, it must be getting big then." The abuse escalated. Gertrude repeatedly brought up Sylvia's interactions with boys, insinuating that any contact would surely lead to pregnancy. Suddenly, one day she kicked Sylvia in the genitals. Paula, one of Gertrude's daughters who was overweight, 3 months pregnant, and jealous of Sylvia's looks, joined in the attack. She pulled Sylvia from her chair to the kitchen floor and yelled, "You're not fit to sit in a chair." On another occasion, while the family was having dinner, Gertrude, Paula, and a neighborhood boy named Randy Gordon Lepper forced Sylvia to eat a hot dog overloaded with mustard, ketchup, and other spices. Naturally, Sylvia vomited, and they cruelly made her swallow what she had thrown up. Exhausted from all the abuse, Sylvia apparently spread a rumor at school accusing Stephanie and Paula of prostitution. One day, a boy made propositions to Stephanie at school, mentioning Sylvia had started the rumor. When they got home from school, Stephanie confronted Sylvia, who admitted to starting the rumor. In retaliation, Stephanie punched Sylvia hard. Sylvia, crying, apologized, and Stephanie also started crying. Randolph Hubbard, 15, Stephanie's boyfriend, learned about the incident and the rumors and brutally attacked Sylvia. He slapped her, slammed her head against the wall, and then threw her down on the floor. Gertrude also joined in, repeatedly using the paddle to beat Sylvia. Every day at the Banashevsky residence was a nightmare, with the episodes of violence only worsening. On one occasion, Paula punched Sylvia in the face with such force that she fractured her own wrist, focusing all her blows on Sylvia's mouth and eyes. Later, Paula used the cast on her arm to hit Sylvia even harder. But the violence wasn't just physical. The Lycan sisters were also subjected to verbal and psychological abuse. On one occasion, Gertrude accused Sylvia of being promiscuous and engaging in prostitution. She delivered a lengthy tirade about the filth of prostitution and the degradation of women in general. Afterwards, she forced young Jenny to hit her own older sister, threatening that if she didn't comply, she would suffer the same fate as Sylvia. The assaults on the Lycans girls didn't only come from the Banaszewski family. Coy Hubbard and several of his classmates frequently visited Gertrude's home and tormented Sylvia both physically and verbally. Often Gertrude's own children and even Gertrude herself would join in to inflict harm on Sylvia. The neighborhood children routinely beat Sylvia. Sometimes they used her as a practice dummy in violent judo sessions, sawing her body, burning her skin with burning sticks. They went so far as to severely injure little Sylvia's genitals. To entertain Gertrude and her teenage accomplices, Sylvia was forced to undress in the living room and masturbate with a bottle. Afterwards, Gertrude would tell everyone that this act of humiliation was to show Jenny what kind of girl her sister was. Over time, Gertrude banned Sylvia from attending school after she confessed to stealing a gym suit from school. She had only taken it because Gertrude refused to buy her clothes. This not only disrupted her education, but also led to severe punishment. Gertrude repeatedly beat Sylvia with a 7-centimeter wide police belt. Gertrude shifted the conversation to the evils of premarital sex and then brutally kicked Lycans in the genitals. During this attack, Stephanie came to Lycan's defense, shouting, "She didn't do anything." Gertrude continued her torment by burning Lycan's fingertips with matches before further whipping her. A few days later, Gertrude again used the police belt to repeatedly whip Jenny after she reportedly stole a single tennis shoe from school to wear on her stronger foot. Due to the increasing frequency and brutality of the torture and mistreatment, Sylvia gradually became incontinent. She was denied access to the bathroom and was forced to wet herself as a form of punishment for her incontinence. On October 6, 1965, Gertrude threw Sylvia Lycans into the basement and tied her up. She often kept Sylvia naked, barely fed her, and frequently denied her water. Sylvia was almost always tied to the stair railing in the basement, with her feet barely touching the ground. The Banaszewski family occasionally paused their physical and mental torment to watch their favorite TV shows. They even involved neighborhood boys who paid 5 cents each to see Sylvia's body displayed and to participate in humiliating her, beating her, burning her, and ultimately mutilating her. During her captivity in the basement, Gertrude and her children tied and gagged Sylvia, then placed her in a bathtub filled with scalding water. They proceeded to rub salt into her wounds. Shortly after this incident, the father of a neighborhood boy named Michael John Monroe anonymously called Arsenal School to report that a girl with open sores all over her body was living at the Banaszewski house. Since Sylvia had not attended school for several days, a school nurse visited Gertrude's address to investigate. Gertrude told the nurse that Sylvia had run away from home the previous week and that she did not know her whereabouts. She added that Sylvia was out of control and that her open sores were the result of her refusal to maintain personal hygiene. Gertrude also claimed that Sylvia was a bad influence on both her own children and her sister. The school did not conduct any further investigations into Sylvia's whereabouts or well-being. In mid-October, John Banaszewski Jr. cruelly tormented Sylvia by offering her a plate of soup and swiftly pulling it away as she tried to eat with her hands. By then, Sylvia was already suffering from extreme malnutrition. That day, Gertrude Banaszewski allowed Sylvia to sleep upstairs, but only on the condition that she did not wet the bed. At night, Sylvia quietly asked Jenny to give her a glass of water in secret before she went to sleep. The next morning, Gertrude discovered that the girl had peed herself. As punishment, she was once again forced to masturbate using a glass bottle in the presence of the Banaszewski children. Shortly thereafter, Gertrude shouted for Likens to return to the kitchen, then ordered her to strip naked before proclaiming to her, "You have branded my daughters. Now I'm going to brand you." She began carving the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," onto Likens' abdomen with a heated needle. When Gertrude was unable to complete the markings, she instructed one of the neighborhood kids, 14-year-old Richard Dean Hobbs, to finish etching the words into Likens' flesh as she took Jenny to a nearby grocery store. In what Hobbs would later insist were short, light etchings, he continued to brand the text into Likens' abdomen as she clenched her teeth and moaned. Richard, like 10-year-old Shirley, took Sylvia to the basement, where they each proceeded to use an anchor bolt in an attempt to burn the letter S beneath Likens' left breast. Although they applied one section of the loop backwards, and this deep burn scar would resemble the number 3. On that grim night, enduring terrible abuse, Sylvia told her sister Jenny, "I know you don't want me to die, but I'm going to die. I'm sure of it." The next day, Gertrude woke Sylvia and forced her to write a letter while dictating its contents. The plan was sinister. They intended to deceive the Likens' parents into believing that Sylvia had run away from the Banaszewski residence. The content of this letter was intended to frame a group of anonymous local boys for extensively abusing and mutilating Likens after she had initially agreed to engage in sexual relations with them before they inflicted the extreme abuse and torture upon her body. After Likens had written this letter, Gertrude finished formulating her plan to have John Jr. and Jenny blindfold Sylvia, then take her to a nearby wooded area known as Jimmy's Forest and leave her there to die. Sylvia was once again tied to the stair railing in the basement. Gertrude offered her cookies to eat, but Sylvia refused them, saying, "Give them to the dog. I don't want them." In response, Gertrude forcefully stuffed the cookies into Sylvia's mouth, and she and John began to beat her, focusing on her stomach. On the morning of October 26th, Sylvia was unable to speak intelligibly or coordinate her limb movements properly. Gertrude took her to the kitchen, leaned her against the wall, and tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk, but Sylvia couldn't hold the glass properly. Frustrated, Gertrude threw Sylvia to the floor and then returned her to the basement. Soon after, Sylvia became delirious, moaning and muttering repeatedly. When Paula asked Sylvia to recite the English alphabet, Sylvia could not get past the first 4 letters or get up from the floor. That afternoon, several of the neighborhood tormentors gathered in the basement. Sylvia flailed her arms in an apparent attempt to point out the faces of the tormentors she recognized, shouting names like, "You're Ricky and you're Gertie." Minutes later, Sylvia tried unsuccessfully to bite into a rotten pear she was given, saying she couldn't feel her teeth. Hearing this, Jenny reminded her, "Don't you remember, Sylvia? Your front tooth fell out when you were 7 years old." Exhausted from all the abuse and certain she would die there, Sylvia desperately tried to escape the basement but collapsed without the strength to make it up the stairs. This attempt was met with the harshest of punishments. Gertrude struck Sylvia's head with excessive violence. Sylvia lost consciousness and Gertrude just stood by, watching her for a while. Shortly after, at 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs returned to the Banishevsky residence and immediately went to the basement. He found Stephanie crying and embracing Sylvia's emaciated and lacerated body after their mother had ordered her to clean Sylvia's body. Stephanie and Richard then decided to give Sylvia a warm, soapy bath and dress her in clean clothes. They laid her on a mattress in one of the bedrooms. Sylvia murmured her last wish, hoping her father would be with her, or at least that she could be taken home. After enduring severe punishment and weakened from lack of food, Sylvia finally succumbed to her injuries and died. When Stephanie realized Sylvia wasn't breathing, she tried to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, while Gertrude repeatedly screamed at the children in the house that Sylvia was faking her death. Initially, Gertrude hit Sylvia's body with a book, yelling at her that she was lying and pretending in an attempt to wake her. Soon, in a panic, Gertrude told Richard Hobbs to call the police from a nearby payphone. When the police arrived at their address around 6:30 p.m., Gertrude led the officers to the bedroom. She showed them Sylvia's extensively beaten and mutilated body lying on a dirty mattress. She then handed them the letter that Sylvia had been forced to write. Gertrude also claimed that she had been caring for the young girl for an hour or more before her death, after having applied antiseptic to Sylvia's wounds in a futile attempt at first aid. She told the police that Sylvia had run away from home with several teenagers before returning to her house that afternoon, bare-chested and with the note in her hands. Holding a Bible, Paula, having declared to everyone in the house that Sylvia's death was meant to happen, looked at Jenny and calmly said, "If you want to live with us, Jenny, we'll treat you like our own sister." Following instructions she had received before the police arrived, Jenny recited the rehearsed version of the events leading up to Sylvia's death before whispering to the officers to take them away and that she would tell them everything. The formal statement provided by Jenny Likens led to the arrest of Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. Baniszewski on suspicion of Sylvia's murder just hours after her body was discovered. The same day, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs were also arrested and charged with the same crimes. The three older Baniszewski children, along with Coy Hubbard, were placed in a nearby juvenile detention center. The younger Baniszewski children and Richard Hobbs were held at the Indianapolis Child Guardians Home. All were detained without bail pending trial. Initially, Gertrude denied any involvement in Sylvia Likens' death, though just a day into her detention, she confessed to knowing the children and acknowledged that her daughter Paula and Coy Hubbard had physically and emotionally abused Sylvia. Gertrude also admitted to forcing the girl to sleep in the basement on approximately 3 occasions when she had wet the bed. She became evasive when an officer suggested that the probable reasons for Sylvia's incontinence were her mental distress and kidney injuries. Paula, showing no remorse, signed a statement admitting she had repeatedly beaten Sylvia. She also confessed to an incident where Sylvia's wrist was fractured and admitted to other acts of brutality, such as pushing her down the basement stairs 2 or 3 times. John Jr. confessed to whipping Sylvia once and often used his fists to abuse her. He admitted to burning Sylvia with matches on several occasions and added that his mother had repeatedly burned the girl with cigarettes. The autopsy of Sylvia Likens' body revealed she had suffered over 150 separate injuries across her body and was extremely emaciated at the time of her death. The injuries varied in location, nature, severity, and healing stage. They included burns, severe bruises, and extensive damage to muscles and nerves. Her vaginal cavity was swollen and nearly closed, though an examination determined her hymen was still intact, debunking Gertrude's claims that Sylvia had been 3 months pregnant and the accusations of prostitution and promiscuity. The official cause of Sylvia Marie Likens' death was identified as subdural hematoma, resulting from a strong blow to the right side of her head. The shock she suffered, primarily due to severe and prolonged damage to her skin and subcutaneous tissue, as well as chronic malnutrition, were also noted by the doctor in relation to Sylvia's death. Rigor mortis had fully developed by the time her body was discovered. indicating that Sylvia could have been dead for up to 8 hours before she was found. Although the autopsy doctor noted that Sylvia had been bathed recently, possibly post-mortem, this action could have accelerated the loss of body temperature and therefore the onset of rigor mortis. Gertrude Banaszewski, her eldest daughter Paula, her son John, and 2 neighborhood youths, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, were tried and convicted in May 1966 for the neglect, torture, and murder of Sylvia Likens. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Gertrude Banaszewski guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment but was paroled in 1985. Paula was found guilty of second-degree murder and was released in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were found guilty of manslaughter and spent less than 2 years in the Indiana Reformatory before being granted parole on February 27, 1968. The citizens of Indiana consider the torture and murder of Sylvia Likens the worst crime ever committed in their state. And a lead investigator from the Indiana Police Department has described it as the most sadistic case he investigated in his 35 years of service. Sylvia died on October 26 in Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Her parents were supposed to return for her and her sister in November, but Sylvia passed away before their arrival. The Likens sisters were fearful of reporting the increasing incidence of abuse and neglect to family members or adults at their school, worried that doing so might worsen their already dire situation. Both sisters feared that speaking out would only worsen their situation. Jenny, the younger sister, struggled against the urge to inform family members because Gertrude had threatened that she would be abused and tortured just as her sister was if she spoke up. Jenny also faced harassment from neighborhood girls, who ridiculed or occasionally beat her whenever she mentioned Sylvia's situation. The closest neighbors of the Banaszewski residence, a middle-aged couple, along with other families in the neighborhood, suspected or had seen signs that the girls were being mistreated, but no one dared to report it to the authorities. Nothing was done to stop the abuse the Likens sisters were enduring, and no one could rescue them in time from this nightmare. All those involved in her torture and murder were sentenced to prison. Although some of the culprits did not serve their full sentences, they could not escape the scars and the horror they caused, which will follow them for the rest of their lives. Marlon Ochoa Lopez was a 19-year-old Latina mother who was nearly 9 months pregnant with a second child. She went missing on April 23, 2019, in a southwestern suburb of Chicago, United States. The last time she was seen was as she was leaving her school. She was expected to give birth on May 5th and was supposed to pick up her 3-year-old son from daycare, but she never showed up. On the morning of her disappearance at around 10:40 a.m., Marlon texted her husband, saying that she was not feeling well and thought labor might be starting soon. By 6 p.m., Giovanni called his mother-in-law to ask about Marlon's whereabouts because the daycare had called to say no one came to pick up their son. The family initially thought that Marlon might have gone into labor, so her mother and stepfather began calling various hospitals and even visited some in hopes of finding her, but they were unsuccessful. Her mother and husband tried to reach her multiple times through text, but she did not respond. That night, her family went to a Chicago police station to report her missing. The officers there told them they had to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. The next day, on April 24th, they returned to file the report. No immediate alert was issued. They were told that only the husband could file the report. Giovanni subsequently filed the report, but the police did not publicize it until 2 days later. On April 25th, the family received news that a patient with Marlon's name had been admitted for a cesarean section at a hospital. However, upon arriving, they were informed that it had been a mix-up with another patient's name. The family continued to call and visit hospitals in the hope that Marlon was somehow giving birth. At this point, they ruled out the possibility that she had been kidnapped as there had been no ransom calls. Members of Marlon's family and their friends took to social media to seek help. The first clue came when some people sent screenshots to Marlon's mother, Raquel, showing a Facebook mothers group Marlon had recently joined and posted in. Nothing suspicious was found, but all this information was handed over to detectives investigating the case. On the morning of the next day, family members received a call from someone claiming to be part of a cartel. The caller said they had Marlon and had taken her to Mexico, demanding $1,000 for her release before hanging up. The family feared the worst and immediately reported this to the police. Authorities suspected it was likely a scam given the low amount of money requested. Due to the lack of progress in the case, the police finally decided to issue a high-risk missing person alert 72 hours after Marlon's disappearance was initially reported. In the alert, it was mentioned that Marlon Ochoa was 9 months pregnant and was last seen leaving her school. She was last seen wearing gray sweatpants and a maroon blouse with her school's logo. By April 28th, flyers began to circulate throughout the neighborhood, and police started questioning family and friends, including her husband Giovanni, as Marlon's parents suspected he might be involved. Days went by without any leads on her whereabouts, only further steps from people who claimed to have seen her. In desperation and with the lack of progress from the police, the family hired a private investigator who spoke Spanish for 35 hours of work. A press conference was held on May 2nd where her parents pleaded for her safe return, suspecting she might be held against her will. Julia, a former school social worker, mentioned during the conference that investigators should look into Marlon's Facebook group interactions, particularly with a person named Clarissa Figueroa. May 5th, Marlon's due date came and went without any information about her whereabouts. There were suspicions that someone was holding her captive until she gave birth. Hope remained that she would be found. 2 days later, the police began to scrutinize screenshots of Facebook conversations between Marlon and Clarissa Figueroa. They discovered that Marlon had agreed to meet with Clarissa on the day she disappeared to pick up baby clothes and supplies. The police then traced this to an address in Chicago, Illinois. When detectives arrived at the location, they were met by Clarissa's daughter Desiree, who told them that her mother was not home and had recently given birth. The detectives left, but on a nearby street, they found Marlon's Honda Civic parked half a block away from Clarissa's home. The family was notified of this discovery the next day. In another development, Marlon's mother received news that a newborn baby had been found in an alley in the northwest part of the city and was taken to a hospital. They immediately thought it could be Marlon's baby and hoped she was still alive. However, their hopes were short-lived when a detective called the next day to inform them that the baby found was not Marlon's, as the DNA did not match her husband's. Amid the false leads, a man claimed to have seen Marlon begging for money on a street in the center of Chicago. However, when they went there, they found no one, even after combing through the streets. While the family continued their search, Chicago police visited Clarissa Figueroa at the hospital where she claimed to have given birth. The hospital records did show a baby admitted that day, but the infant was in intensive care with no brain activity. Incredibly, the police did not investigate further and took Clarissa's word that she had given birth, even though she showed no physical signs of having recently delivered a baby. The hospital social worker also failed to question her further. By May 9th, a walk was organized to distribute flyers in the area where Marlon's car had been found. Meanwhile, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services was alerted about suspicions surrounding Clarissa's newborn and took the baby into protective custody. That afternoon, Giovanni Lopez, Marlon's husband, underwent a DNA test to determine if he was the father. Saliva samples were taken from the infant, and hair samples were taken from Marlon's husband for comparison. Despite the lack of progress and communication from the police, an anonymous person contacted the family the next day. This person claimed to have seen Marlon enter Figueroa's home on the day she disappeared and provided the address. When the family relayed this to the police, they were told that without a court-approved warrant, they could not enter the property. On May 12th, further clues emerged in the form of screenshots from a GoFundMe page, apparently set up by the Figueroas to raise money for the newborn, who was on life support. However, due to many previous false leads, the family did not initially pay much attention to this. What they did not know was that they would soon find the answers they had been desperately seeking. It was then that they received the DNA test results, which confirmed that the baby's father was Giovanni Lopez. The Department of Children and Family Services granted custody of the child. While they were relieved to know this, the question remained, where was Marlon? They would find out on May 14, 2019, after providing all the clues to the police and learning that the DNA indeed matched. They obtained a search warrant to enter the Figueroa family's home. Upon arrival, they found Clarissa Figueroa's boyfriend cleaning a carpet with bleach and a hose. He immediately dropped the hose and went inside when he saw the officers. They informed him they had a warrant to search the property in connection to Clarissa Figueroa's alleged involvement in Marlon Ochoa's case. He did not resist and let them in. Inside, they found Clarissa Figueroa and her daughter Desiree. The officers noticed some blood stains and cleaning supplies, but initially, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, their attention was caught by a trash can in the corner of the backyard. Upon lifting the lid, they made a gruesome discovery: a woman's body with a cable around her neck and a cross-shaped wound on her abdomen, showing signs of having been pregnant. After the discovery, the family was informed that something terrible had been found and that they needed to be strong. The identity wasn't confirmed yet, so they couldn't say for sure it was Marlon. Initially, the family hoped she might be alive but in grave condition, as they were not informed about the state of the body. All 3 people inside the house were arrested as primary suspects. The body was taken to the county medical examiner's office, which after 15 hours confirmed that it was indeed Marlon Ochoa and the cause of death was strangulation. Marlon's father expressed that they had come to this country to give their daughter a good life, and unfortunately, there are bad people everywhere. He also emphasized that Marlon had a bright future ahead and was continuing her education to provide a better life for her children. On May 17th, the primary suspects were brought to court. Clarissa Figueroa, 46, Desiree Figueroa, 24, and Piotr Bobuk, 40, all pleaded not guilty to the charges. However, the evidence was overwhelming and a 911 call helped reconstruct the entire crime. The tragedy started when Clarissa Figueroa lost her 20-year-old son in 2017 and couldn't cope with his loss. She then began entertaining the idea of having another child. Towards the end of 2018, Clarissa Figueroa began to fake a pregnancy. She posted ultrasounds and pictures of a future baby room on social media and even showed her family an ultrasound that she had taken from the internet. Her daughter Desiree was surprised by this behavior, especially since her 46-year-old mother could no longer have children due to a tubal ligation years prior. Clarissa even confessed to her daughter that she would become a mother again, even if it meant killing for it. Months later, Desiree also became pregnant, and Clarissa decided it was time to have a baby so they could both raise their children together. Clarissa announced her fake pregnancy and joined a Facebook group for expectant mothers. Before Marlon Ochoa disappeared, she posted on Facebook in a group called Help a Sister Out, saying that she needed a double stroller for her 3-year-old and her unborn child. She was willing to buy, trade, or simply accept a donation as she was unemployed at the time. Clarissa responded to her post, offering new baby clothes and other items. On the night of April 23, 2019, Marlon arrived at Clarissa's house in southwest Chicago. She had just left school and drove there. Once inside and seated on the sofa, Clarissa told her to wait while she and Desiree went to fetch the clothes. As Marlon waited, the women went to the kitchen and initiated their terrible plan. Desiree distracted Marlon with photos of Clarissa's deceased son. Clarissa then used a coaxial cable to strangle Marlon. Despite Marlon's resistance, Clarissa overpowered her and yelled at her daughter for not doing her part correctly. After Marlon stopped breathing, Clarissa went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, a plastic bag, and a blanket. They proceeded to cut open Marlon's abdomen in a cross shape to extract the baby. They cut the umbilical cord and removed the placenta, but the baby was not breathing. In desperation, Clarissa called 911, falsely claiming she had just given birth at home and that the baby was not breathing. She started performing CPR as instructed until the paramedics arrived. The paramedics arrived, and the baby was taken to a hospital with severe brain damage. Hospital staff found it strange that Clarissa showed no signs of having given birth, but didn't question her at the time. Clarissa continued to pose as the baby's mother, even starting a GoFundMe campaign for donations. They named the baby Sander, although his real name was Giovanni Hadiel Lopez. Tragically, he died on June 14, 2019 due to brain death caused by oxygen and blood deprivation. Clarissa Figueroa and her daughter were charged with Marlon Ochoa's murder, while Clarissa's boyfriend was charged with covering up the crime. The family of Marlon expressed outrage at the hospital for not raising questions sooner and felt discriminated against due to their undocumented status. Marlon and her family were originally from Puebla, Mexico. Marlon was born on November 16, 1999, and had moved to the United States when she was 2 years old with her family's hope of a better life, a dream that ended in tragedy. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a sunny afternoon in Bond Beach, Florida, a man named Muhammad visited the local police department with a shocking story. He claimed that a woman, whom he knew only as Delilah, had approached him with an unusual and disturbing request. Muhammad alleged that Delilah had offered to hire him to commit a murder. While his story seemed plausible, Muhammad failed to provide one crucial detail: Delilah's last name. Despite this limitation, the Bond Beach Police Department took Muhammad's claim seriously and launched an investigation. The detectives were tasked with identifying the mysterious Delilah and determining who her husband was. To gather more information, they decided to use Muhammad as bait to set up a meeting with Delilah. They chose a local mobile gas station as the meeting location, given Muhammad's statement that Delilah lived nearby. At the designated meeting spot, the police set up several surveillance vehicles to monitor the encounter, hoping to gather evidence and piece together the puzzle surrounding Delilah's identity and motives. Before the woman arrived, the detectives briefed Muhammad on what to say to her. They secretly fitted him with a wire and recorder, allowing them to listen in on their conversation as it happened. As they continued to monitor the mobile gas station, the detectives focused on the interaction between Muhammad and a woman named Delilah. What surprised them was Delilah's appearance, which didn't fit the typical profile of someone who would want her husband killed. Delilah, an attractive woman wearing a skirt and tank top, got into the car with Muhammad. Muhammad, pretending to be hesitant, asked if it was worth having someone killed. Delilah replied that she couldn't divorce her husband because she feared he would retaliate if she tried to leave him and divide their assets. The woman told Muhammad that after her husband's murder, she intended to create an alibi by going to a different location, such as Boca Raton. Muhammad then asked her if anyone would suspect her of involvement in her husband's death, and she confidently replied that no one would accuse her. The detectives were stunned by the woman's casual tone, as she discussed hiring a hitman to kill her husband. As they continued to listen, they were horrified by the woman's nonchalant attitude, which made it seem like she was discussing a routine business deal rather than arranging for someone's murder. At one point, she even showed Muhammad photos of her husband, which further revealed her callous disregard for human life. During the conversation, the woman made a stunning admission to Muhammad, revealing that she planned to pay a hitman to kill her husband. This confession was a crucial breakthrough for the detective, as it confirmed the woman's involvement in soliciting a murder. However, the detective knew that to build a stronger case, they needed to gather more evidence. The woman told Muhammad that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and hand it over to the hitman later. After discussing the plan with Muhammad, the woman left the mobile gas station and drove home. The detectives followed her to gather information about her address. A records check revealed that the address belonged to Dalia Doe, not Delilah as they had initially thought. With this new information, the detectives ran a background check on the vehicle Dalia used to meet Muhammad at the gas station. This allowed them to obtain the registered owner's name, which was her husband, Mike Doe. To their friends, Mike and Dalia seemed like a loving and happy couple. The two had met when Mike was browsing the internet at work, looking for something to do when he was feeling bored. Mike found a website that offered escort services and decided to hire one. This decision would have a profound impact on his life. When the escort arrived, Mike was immediately drawn to her physical attractiveness. He thought she was exceptionally beautiful, and he felt an undeniable attraction between them. As they spent more time together, they quickly developed a strong connection. Effortlessly engaging in friendly conversations over the next few days, Mike and Dalia's friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship after they spent a weekend together. They quickly realized their feelings for each other went beyond friendship. As a result, they became a committed couple. A few months into their relationship, they stumbled upon an engagement ring store, which led to a conversation about marriage, a topic they had previously discussed. Mike was drawn to the idea of spending his life with Dahlia and decided to purchase a ring, symbolizing his commitment to their future together. Despite their relationship moving quickly, Mike was deeply happy and in love. Before meeting Dahlia, Mike had a troubled past. In 2001, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison in Broward County, Florida, for grand theft, fraud, and false telephone sales. At the time, was struggling with drug addiction and desperation for money, which he later acknowledged was no excuse for his mistakes. Mike served his 2-year sentence and was given 28 years of probation. The court granted Mike a lengthy probation period to give him time to pay back the significant amount of money he owed. However, when Mike returned home, he was unsure of how he would repay the debt. Determined to settle his debt, Mike found a job as a cook at a local restaurant, earning $350 weekly, which was insufficient to make a notable dent in the substantial amount he owed. To improve his financial situation and secure an early release from probation, Mike sought a better-paying job. A friend offered him an office job near his home, allowing him to transition from cooking to email marketing. As Mike and Dahlia started dating, he eventually confided in her about his probation and the limitations it imposed. Mike explained that he required permission to leave the state while on probation. Dahlia, who had a strong desire to travel, expressed her wish to explore the world with Mike. To help Mike become debt-free, Dahlia offered to provide $91,000 if he paid the remaining balance, enabling them to clear the debt and start the life Dahlia had envisioned. Dahlia, a successful real estate agent, was financially stable and able to help her partner Mike pay off his debt and clear his name. Mike consulted his attorney to understand the process, and the attorney advised him to gather the necessary funds to be released from probation. To facilitate the payment, Dahlia and Mike agreed that she would send the money from her Bank of America account to the attorney. Dahlia informed Mike that she had transferred the funds, but when Mike followed up with the attorney, he was told that the payment had not been received. Mike waited a day and then asked Dahlia about the status of the transfer. However, Dahlia insisted that she had sent the money, leaving Mike frustrated and unsure about what was happening. Mike's concern grew, so he contacted his attorney again, only to be told that they still hadn't received anything. Dahlia claimed to have sent the money to the attorney, but couldn't explain the delay. 2 days had passed since the transaction, but the attorney remained without the funds. Mike asked Dahlia for proof of the transaction, needing the receipt to verify the details. However, Dahlia suspected foul play, suggesting the attorney might have stolen the money. She vowed to find the missing sum, while Mike sought to move past the misunderstanding. Meanwhile, a supervisor at the Bond Beach Police Department reached out to Sergeant Whitey Jean for assistance. Sergeant Jean met with a detective working on Dahlia Deo's case. The detective briefed Sergeant Whitey Jean on the case, revealing that Dahlia wanted to hire someone to kill her husband. The detective explained that Dahlia was waiting for a call from the would-be hitman and asked Sergeant Whitey Jean to pretend to be the hitman and arrange a meeting with her. Sergeant Whitey Jean agreed to help with the investigation and took on the role of the hitman. As the hitman, he contacted Dahlia and demanded a $3,000 advance and the key to her house. The detective had requested the key as part of their plan to make Dahlia believe the murder would happen at her home. However, Dahlia was unhappy about the payment demand and called Muhammad, the informant, to express her concerns. During the call, the detective overheard Dahlia's fears and worried that they might have scared her off. They feared that Dahlia might change her mind and find someone else to commit the crime. On August 3, 2009, Dahlia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean, who was posing as a hitman in a CVS parking lot. However, Dahlia didn't bring the agreed-upon payment, which led Sergeant Whitey Jean to warn her that if he had to wait until after the murder to get paid, she would need to give him $7,000 in cash up front. Sergeant Whitey Jean explained to Dahlia that he would plan the staged break-in and murder of her husband Mike on Wednesday morning, taking advantage of the recent robberies in the area. He outlined his plan to make it look like a legitimate break-in, shooting Mike twice in the head to make it appear like a robbery gone wrong. Sergeant Whitey Jean also told Dahlia that he would contact her a few days after the murder, as he knew the police would be closely monitoring her activities in the aftermath of the crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean cautioned Dahlia that the delay was essential to avoid raising suspicions and maintaining the operation's secrecy. During their conversation, he gave her multiple opportunities to withdraw from the murder-for-hire plot. However, Dahlia expressed her unwavering commitment, stating she was 5,000% certain about her decision to have her husband killed. Dahlia provided Sergeant Whitey Jean with crucial details, revealing that her husband, Mike, followed a predictable morning routine, walking the dog at a specific time and leaving the house unlocked. This information was vital to the success of the plan. She also told the sergeant that she would create an alibi by going to the gym during the murder, ensuring her absence from the house when the crime would take place. The sergeant instructed Dahlia to arrive at the gym by 6 a.m. and informed her that he would enter her home at 6:30 a.m. After speaking with Dahlia, Sergeant Whitey Jean was taken aback by her extraordinary cruelty. Having encountered few individuals in his line of work who exhibited a similar level of ruthlessness, the detective wanted to create a fake crime scene at Dahlia and Mike's home to see how Dahlia would react on the day of the alleged hit. To do this, they needed to know Dahlia's whereabouts. At 5:30 a.m., Dahlia told Mike she was going to the gym, which Mike found unusual since she had never gone that early before. However, he didn't think much of it and continued with his morning routine. The detective kept an eye on Dahlia to make sure she went to the gym and went inside. This confirmed that the plan could move forward. But before setting up the fake crime scene, the detective needed to fill Mike Dio in on what was happening. About 30 minutes after Dahlia left for the gym, loud banging noises were heard at Mike and Dahlia's house, prompting Mike to rush to the door. When he opened it, he was surprised to find several police officers standing there. Confused and worried, Mike asked them what was going on. The detective informed Mike that his wife, Dahlia, had tried to hire a hitman to kill him, but the hitman was actually an undercover cop. The entire situation was a setup to look like a murder-for-hire plot. Mike was in shock when the police told him that his wife had hired someone to kill him. The detectives took him to the police station, leaving his home to be staged as a crime scene with fake police tape and lights. The detectives then called Dahlia, telling her that they needed to question her about an incident involving her husband. When she arrived home, she found her house surrounded by police cars and crime scene tape. The detective told her that her husband had been murdered and she broke down in tears. However, the detective noticed that Dahlia's reaction seemed unusual, as she didn't produce any tears. The detective began questioning Dahlia about suspects, trying to get her to confess to hiring the hitman. Dahlia claimed that her marriage was fine and that Mike's problems with probation and a stock fraud conviction might have led to his murder. Unbeknownst to her, Mike was watching from another room. The detective then revealed that they knew the truth behind the murder and brought in Sergeant Whitey Jean, who Dahlia claimed she didn't know. The detective arrested Dahlia for solicitation of murder, revealing that the hitman was an undercover cop. Mike was given the chance to confront Dahlia, but she refused to admit her guilt. Dahlia's trial took place on April 26, 2011, where Mike testified against her for 3 days. Her defense argued that the entire plot was a publicity stunt for a reality TV show, but Mike denied any involvement. Mike denied any interest in reality TV shows and claimed he had no involvement in Dahlia's alleged plot to kill him. He also stated he had no knowledge of public relations. After the trial, the jury found Dahlia guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder with a firearm, and she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Mike was relieved by the verdict, but also felt a sense of closure, knowing justice had been served. However, Dahlia's attorneys appealed the conviction, citing a juror's remark about Dahlia poisoning Mike's Starbucks drink, which was not presented as evidence during the trial. The appellate court reversed the conviction, and a second trial was held. Despite the state's confidence in their case, the jury reached a hung verdict, resulting in a mistrial. A third trial was held and Dahlia was again found guilty, this time receiving a 16-year prison sentence. Dahlia's defense team continued to appeal her conviction, but the Florida Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review her case. Her attorneys planned to file a motion with a federal judge to review the third trial for constitutional violations, which would be their last chance to secure a new trial. Despite her conviction, Dahlia has become a respected figure in prison, leading a Bible study group and earning praise from fellow inmates. She is separated from her young son, who lives with his grandmother, and deeply misses being with him. Thanks for diving into another mystery with us. If you enjoyed unraveling the clues and chasing the truth, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more thrilling cases and deep dives into the unknown.